Welcome back to Fusty Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. The marble floors of Pascal's richer mansion echoed only his footsteps. Every wall was lined with success, portraits of awards, magazine covers, business trophies. Yet he felt nothing but emptiness. After his engagement collapsed in a scandalous betrayal, he had turned his back on the world. Reporters called him the invisible billionaire because no one had seen him in public for months. Servants whispered about his moods, his sleepless nights, and the locked piano room where he sometimes played until dawn. Pascal preferred silence over pity, order over chaos. That was why when his old butler introduced a new maid named Deborah, he barely looked up. She was just another employee, another face destined to fade into the marble. But fate had a different script. Deborah wasn't like the others. Her quietness carried grace, not fear. Her eyes spoke of dignity hidden behind simplicity. She worked silently, moved lightly, and treated the house with reverence as though she understood his ghosts. Pascal noticed her from the corner of his eye, but told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. Yet something about her presence softened the air. For the first time in months, the mansion didn't feel suffocating. Beneath his cold exterior, a question formed. Who exactly was this maid that didn't flinch under silence? That morning, Pascal woke earlier than usual. A restless night had driven him to take a walk through the East Wing, a part of the mansion he rarely visited. The soft hum of running water drifted from one of the guest bathrooms. Curious, he stepped closer, assuming a tap was left open. But when he pushed the door slightly, he froze. There, under the golden morning light, stood Deborah, wrapped in nothing but a towel, her wet hair dripping down her back. Her eyes widened, mirroring his own shock. For a second, time stopped. Pascal stammered an apology and shut the door so fast that his heart raced like thunder. But the image lingered, burning into his thoughts with confusing intensity. Deborah stood behind the door, trembling, not from shame, but fear would he fire her? She had only been there for 2 weeks, trying to rebuild her life away from her past. She had survived scandal before, one that destroyed her reputation among her wealthy peers. Working as a maid had been her only way to start anew. That one accidental moment felt like the universe mocking her again. When Pascal later sent for her, she braced herself for dismissal. Yet his tone was calm, almost embarrassed. He apologized, offered her an extra day off, and walked away. But both knew something had changed. A spark neither wanted to admit had been lit. That night, Pascal couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the image of Deborah again and again, the vulnerability in her eyes, the purity in her silence. He told himself it was guilt, but deep down, he knew it wasn't. Something about her disarmed him. The woman he had walked in on was not seductive or manipulative. She was simply real. For a man surrounded by lies and ambition, that was dangerous. He began noticing the little things. How she hummed quietly when cleaning the hallway. How she tucked loose curls behind her ear when nervous. He caught himself waiting for her to appear, and that scared him more than any business rival ever had. Deborah, on the other hand, avoided him completely. She changed her routes, cleaned when he was out, and moved like a shadow. But her heart betrayed her. Every time she heard his footsteps or the deep baritone of his voice, she felt a strange flutter. Pascal had apologized with sincerity, something she hadn't experienced from men in years. Her past, one filled with deception, betrayal, and forced appearances, had taught her that sincerity was rare. Yet here it was, coming from a billionaire who could command the world. That night, both lay awake in different rooms, fighting thoughts they didn't want to name. Desire, curiosity, fear. Rumors spread quickly in big houses. The head chef noticed Pascal's unusual interest in the maid. The guards whispered that he had been acting human lately. Even Mrs. Hilda, the elderly housekeeper, caught on and gave Deborah wary looks. Deborah tried to remain invisible, but whispers became knives. One afternoon, while cleaning the study, she overheard 2 staff members giggling about what really happened in the East Wing. Her chest tightened. Shame returned, a familiar, cruel companion from her old life. She fled to her small quarters, tears she hadn't shed in years falling freely. It wasn't the gossip that hurt. It was the thought that Pascal might believe it. But Pascal heard about the gossip too, and it enraged him. The man who hadn't spoken to his staff in weeks suddenly summoned everyone. His voice, cold and cutting, silenced the mansion. Anyone caught spreading lies about my employees will be dismissed immediately, he warned. The staff bowed, trembling. Later, Deborah found a small note slipped under her door. Ignore them. I trust you. It was unsigned, but she knew who wrote it. Her heart raced, torn between gratitude and confusion. For the first time, she saw not just a billionaire, but the man, one who valued dignity over pride. Weeks passed, and the mansion slowly thawed from its emotional winter. Pascal began taking his meals in the dining hall again. One evening, he did the unthinkable. He asked Deborah to join him. She froze, unsure she heard correctly. It's just dinner, he said with a soft smile. That night, she sat across from him at the long mahogany table, feeling the weight of history. A billionaire and his maid sharing a meal. Conversation was awkward at first, but Pascal's dry humor and quiet warmth melted the tension. They spoke of music, of dreams, and of places she longed to see. It was the first real conversation either had enjoyed in months. For Pascal, Deborah's honesty was intoxicating. She didn't flatter or pretend. She spoke like someone who had nothing left to prove. When she laughed, he felt his chest lighten. The meal ended with silence, the kind that felt peaceful, not empty. But as she excused herself, their hands brushed accidentally, sending an electric current neither could ignore. Pascal watched her walk away, realizing that his carefully built walls were cracking. He didn't know it yet, but that dinner was the beginning of everything, the point where curiosity turned into connection, and connection began turning into love. Deborah thought she could bury her past, but ghosts have a way of finding their owners. One afternoon, while Pascal was away at a business meeting, a visitor arrived, Victor Richard Pascal's cousin, arrogant and sharp-eyed. He instantly recognized Deborah. Years ago, she had been part of a high society scandal involving her family's bankruptcy and her father's fraudulent deals. Deborah Vincent? He smirked. Didn't expect to find you scrubbing floors. Panic seized her. She begged him not to tell Pascal, but Victor saw an opportunity. Maybe I'll stay quiet. If you do something for me, he whispered. Fear chilled her veins. The very life she built on silence threatened to collapse. When Pascal returned, he sensed her unease but didn't press. He had no idea that his cousin had discovered her secret. That night, Victor cornered him in the study, pretending concern. You might want to know who you're feeding at your table, he said, slyly. Pascal dismissed it as gossip until Victor showed him an old tabloid photo of Deborah in an expensive gown, the daughter of a disgraced tycoon. Shock rippled through him. The maid he thought was humble had once lived in luxury. Yet, instead of anger, something else stirred inside him. Why did she hide this from me? He needed answers, not judgment. The confrontation came that night. Pascal called Deborah to his office, the air thick with tension. Why didn't you tell me who you are? He asked quietly. She couldn't meet his eyes. Because people don't see me, Pascal. They see headlines, scandals, and lies I didn't write. Her voice broke, tears trembling on her lashes. She told him everything, her father's crimes, the media humiliation, the years spent running from whispers. She became a maid to reclaim her dignity, to earn an honest living away from her name. Pascal listened, silent, his heart torn between shock and admiration. When she finished, she whispered, If you want me gone, I'll leave tonight. But Pascal stood, walked around the desk, and did something unexpected. He took her hand. You've already paid for someone else's sins, he said. You don't have to keep punishing yourself. The words shattered her walls. Deborah broke down completely. And for the first time in years, she felt safe crying in front of someone. In that moment, Pascal wasn't a billionaire and she wasn't a maid. They were two broken souls finding peace in each other's truth. Victor wasn't done. Seeing Pascal defend Deborah only deepened his resentment. He began whispering in business circles that Pascal had lost control, that he was being manipulated by a maid with a criminal past. Investors hesitated. Media sharks circled. Pascal, S Company shares dipped slightly, and Victor smiled, sensing blood. He even bribed a staff member to photograph Pascal and Deborah together, hoping to create a scandal. But Pascal anticipated it. When the photo leaked online, instead of denial, he publicly defended her. Deborah Vincent is an employee of integrity and courage. I stand by her. The statement went viral, dividing public opinion, but proving his loyalty. Inside the mansion, Victor's fury grew. He cornered Deborah again, hissing, "You've turned him against his own blood." But Deborah stood tall. "Maybe you should have treated him like family," she said coldly. The maid he once mocked now looked regal, her quiet strength blinding. Pascal later discovered Victor's schemes and had him removed from all company holdings. It was the first time in years Pascal had chosen heart over blood, and he didn't regret it. One rainy evening, Pascal found Deborah sitting alone in the garden, lost in thought. The scent of wet roses surrounded her. He joined her, both silent for a while. Finally he spoke, his voice soft. "You've changed me, Deborah. I used to think I was alive because I was rich, but now I know I was just surviving." Her eyes met his, unsure she should believe what she heard. "You deserve happiness, too," she said. "You've carried guilt long enough." He smiled faintly. "And you've carried shame long enough." Their words hung between them like a vow. Slowly, he reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. When he kissed her, it was gentle, uncertain, but real. No music played, no witnesses watched, just the rain and two souls daring to trust again. For the first time, Pascal felt free of the ghost of his ex and the pain of betrayal. And for Deborah, it was the first time she felt worthy of love without hiding behind lies. That night, their world quietly shifted, two broken hearts beginning to beat in rhythm. Love, once born, doesn't stay hidden for long. The mansion buzzed with new energy. Even the staff noticed Pascal's brighter mood. But love in a world of wealth is never simple. Paparazzi began following Pascal, and whispers turned to headlines. "Billionaire in love with ex-socialite Maid," splashed across magazines. Deborah panicked. "This is my fault," she cried, but Pascal held her close. "No, this is our story now." He hired security, fired the gossipers, and stood firm. Yet, not everyone approved. Business partners warned him that public image mattered more than emotions. But Pascal refused to retreat. "If they can't respect my choice, they don't deserve my success," he declared. The storm outside mirrored the one in their hearts. Deborah struggled with guilt, afraid she would destroy his empire. Pascal, however, found new strength in protecting her. Their bond deepened, not in luxury, but in loyalty. And though the world mocked them, they found peace in shared defiance. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of a greater test, one that would decide if love built in scandal could survive the fire of destiny. The world outside Pascal's mansion had become a battlefield of opinions. Some praised his courage to love beyond class. Others called it madness. Investors whispered in boardrooms. His cousin Victor spread poison in secret circles, and journalists camped outside his gates. Pascal, however, remained calm. What shook him wasn't the noise. It was watching Deborah slowly retreat again. She began sleeping less, smiling less, and working as though she could erase the chaos by dusting it away. He found her one night in the kitchen, staring blankly at the kettle. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," he said softly. Her tears finally fell. "They'll destroy you because of me," she whispered. "Then let them try," he replied. Inside, though, Pascal battled his own storm. Loving Deborah had exposed his humanity, but it had also made him vulnerable. Every phone call from his board reminded him of what he was risking. Yet when he looked at her, all logic dissolved. She was his peace, his rebellion, his reminder that wealth meant nothing without purpose. The mansion that once echoed with silence now carried the heartbeat of something real. He knew that if he lost her, he'd lose himself all over again, and that was a price he would never pay twice. One afternoon, Victor returned, not as family, but as a viper dressed in charm. He offered Pascal a deal to restore his company's shaken reputation. "End your little fairy tale, and I'll bring the investors back," he smirked. Pascal didn't even blink. "I built this empire without you. I can rebuild it without you." The rejection stung Victor's pride. Turning to Deborah, he sneered, "You'll regret ever stepping into this house." Later that night, Deborah found a threatening letter slid under her door, a reminder how fragile her safety still was. She hid it, not wanting to worry Pascal, but the fear lingered like a shadow in her chest. The tension reached its peak during a company gala. Pascal brought Deborah as his guest, his official partner, shocking the elite. She stood beside him in a simple black dress, her dark skin glowing under chandeliers, her confidence both defiant and elegant. The room buzzed with gossip, but Pascal's hand on hers silenced the noise. "Let them see," he murmured. "You belong here." That night marked the beginning of open war, love against arrogance, truth against hypocrisy. And in that war, they were ready to fight together. The days following the gala were ruthless. Several business partners withdrew contracts, citing ethical concerns. Pascal faced financial tremors that would have crippled lesser men. Deborah begged him to let her leave, believing her absence would calm the storm. But Pascal refused. "You're not my weakness," he said. "You're the reason I remember what strength feels like." Yet the strain began showing. Long hours, board pressure, and sleepless nights carved shadows under his eyes. For Deborah, guilt became a constant ache. She watched the man who rescued her from shame now being crucified for loving her. It all came crashing down one night when she packed her bag quietly, leaving a note on his desk. "You deserve peace, Pascal, and the world will never give it to you while I'm here." Pascal found it minutes after she slipped out. Panic sliced through his heart. He tore through the mansion, calling her name, but the only answer was the echo of his own voice. That night, under a violent storm, he got into his car and drove into the night, chasing the woman who had unknowingly become the pulse of his existence. Deborah didn't go far. She found refuge at a small guest house near the city outskirts, trying to disappear again. But her heart betrayed her resolve every hour. She kept imagining Pascal's face, his voice when he said her name, the way he saw her not as a scandal but as a person. Meanwhile, Pascal searched endlessly, following every trace, calling every contact until exhaustion broke him. Days passed before fate reunited them. He found her at dawn, sitting by a bus stop with her small suitcase. When their eyes met, time stood still. "If you ever walk away again," he said, voice breaking, "take my heart with you, because it doesn't work without you." Deborah wept as he pulled her into his arms. For the first time, she stopped running from her past, from fear, from love. Pascal took her back home, but this time she didn't return as a maid. He introduced her to the staff as the woman I love. The mansion that had once been a prison of solitude now breathed life again. It was no longer just his home. It was their beginning. Their reunion was beautiful, but the world wasn't ready to forgive. The media ambushed them, tabloids twisting their love into scandalous fiction. "Gold digger steals billionaire's heart," one headline screamed. Pascal's lawyer suggested silence, but Deborah insisted on speaking out. In a televised interview, she faced the world's judgment with dignity. "I didn't steal anyone's heart," she said calmly. "I healed one, and in return, he healed mine." Her grace silenced critics. That single interview turned tides, earning her unexpected respect. Pascal watched from backstage, eyes glistening with pride. Afterward, he held her hand and whispered, "You didn't just defend yourself, you defended love." For the first time in his public life, he smiled genuinely on camera. The narrative began to shift, not instantly, but enough to show that truth, when spoken with courage, could pierce through lies. That night, Pascal and Deborah danced alone in the ballroom. No music, no audience, just heartbeats. Forgiveness, not from the world, but from themselves, became their truest victory. Weeks later, Pascal planned something simple but unforgettable. On a quiet Sunday evening, he took Deborah to the mansion's rooftop garden, a place she had often cleaned without noticing its beauty. Candlelight flickered across the stone tiles, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of lavender. She gasped when she saw him kneel. "Deborah," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I spent years hiding behind walls made of pride and pain. You walked in, and instead of judging my darkness, you brought light." He opened the ring box, its diamond glowing softly. Will you be my forever peace? Deborah's tears glistened under the stars. You're asking a maid to marry you, she whispered. Pascal smiled. No, I'm asking the woman who taught me to live again. She nodded, unable to speak, and he slid the ring onto her finger. Fireworks lit up the sky as the mansion staff cheered from below. For once, every soul inside those walls witnessed not a scandal, but a miracle born of courage. That night, Pascal knew wealth could build empires, but love built eternity. The wedding was small but breathtaking. Guests arrived from both sides of their worlds, executives in suits mingling with maids and gardeners dressed in new clothes. The ceremony took place in the mansion's courtyard, where sunlight kissed the marble floor. Deborah walked down the aisle in a modest ivory gown, her natural beauty glowing with elegance. Pascal couldn't take his eyes off her. When the priest asked if he took her as his wife, his answer was clear and strong. With every breath, Deborah echoed him with tears and laughter. Their kiss sealed not just a union, but rebellion against class, status, and expectation. After the vows, Pascal raised a toast to love that chooses courage over comfort, truth over pride. The crowd applauded, but Deborah's smile held the real victory, freedom. As night fell, they danced under the open sky, surrounded by those who once doubted and those who now believed. For once, the billionaire and the maid weren't two worlds colliding. They were one story rewritten by love itself. Just when peace seemed permanent, the past tried to resurrect itself. Victor, humiliated and stripped of power, forged false documents implying that Deborah had embezzled money from her late father's estate. The story resurfaced online, threatening to reignite scandal. But this time, Pascal didn't panic. He hired a private investigator who uncovered the truth. It was Victor's doing. In front of the press, Pascal exposed his cousin's lies, submitting evidence that cleared Deborah's name permanently. The public apology that followed from media outlets felt like long-delayed justice. Deborah faced the cameras once more, not as a victim, but as a victor. Redemption doesn't erase pain, she said, but it gives it purpose. Her words went viral, turning her from a scandal symbol into an icon of resilience. Pascal watched proudly as the woman who once feared her own reflection became the world's example of grace under fire. The ghosts were finally buried, and this time, for good. Months later, the mansion was filled with laughter again. Deborah stood by the window of their bedroom, holding a small envelope from the doctor. When Pascal entered, she handed it to him silently. He read it twice, then looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. We're having a baby? She nodded, tears of joy spilling over. Pascal lifted her into his arms, spinning her as she laughed. For a man who had once believed happiness was a myth, it felt like witnessing light after endless night. They spent evenings talking about baby names, arguing playfully over colors for the nursery. Deborah glowed, her strength now softened by tenderness. Pascal became overprotective, attending every appointment, canceling meetings just to cook breakfast for her. For a man who once ruled empires, love had become his new throne. As her belly grew, so did his awe. You've given me everything I didn't know I was missing, he whispered one night. And she smiled, placing his hand over her heart. We both found home, Pascal, right here. When the baby finally arrived, the world seemed to pause. A healthy boy with his father's eyes and mother's calm spirit. Pascal held him, trembling. The billionaire who once lived in emptiness now cradled the purest form of wealth. Deborah, exhausted but radiant, watched them with silent tears. He's our beginning, she whispered. Pascal kissed her forehead. No, he said softly. You were? News of their child's birth spread across the media, but this time there was no mockery, only celebration. People called it the love that changed the billionaire. Years later, the mansion that once symbolized isolation became a sanctuary of laughter and life. Pascal often played the piano again, this time with little hands pressing random keys beside him. Deborah would watch them from the doorway, her heart full. They had survived judgment, betrayal, and pain, and emerged with something eternal. Their love had rewritten their destinies, proving that when two souls collide by accident but choose each other by will, Even a mistake can become a miracle. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.